good at that anymore, and you have to build them back up, and so there's always something to work on, which
Good evening and welcome to a special March 28th meeting of 2024 for the Zoning Board of Adjustments. I'd like to call this meeting to order at 6 p.m. We have a quorum of 4 members and 1 alternate. And I would like to, our agenda today would be approval of minutes, and then we would go into our regular agenda with 1 action. Do we have a motion for approval of minutes?
Make a motion to approve the ZBA meeting minutes from March 7th.
There's been a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been motion and second. Any discussion? No discussion. All in favor, raise your hand. All opposed, raise your hand. Motion carries 5-0. We'd like to move into our regular agenda with consideration and possible action. VARZ 24-3, a variance for an attached patio to project more than 50% into the rear setback. This is a request by Walker Drager, Avray Custom Pools applicant on behalf of Lance Willis, owner, for approval of a variance as permitted by the Unified Development Code ordinance number 2000-T to allow for an attached patio cover sharing the roof line of the main structure to project into the required rear yard for a depth greater than 50% of the required rear setback for the single-family residential 1. We have a general location of 3019 Country Club Drive, Pearland, Texas. Do we have a staff report?
Member Lewis, Chair Lewis, before the staff report, if I could just get you to clarify, I know there are 4 regular members here and there are 2 alternates here. For the purposes of the record, would you please identify which alternate is serving in the full capacity and which one is waiting?
We have Christopher serving in the full capacity, and we have Crystal Cook serving as waiting.
Observing. Okay.
Observing, yes.
Thank you very much, sir. We do appreciate that.
So with that, Chair, let me introduce Patrick Bauer to present the staff report. Patrick, take it away.
Thank you, Martin. Good evening, Chair and members of the board. As mentioned, the request tonight is for a variance to allow for an attached patio to extend more than 50% into the rear setback and to extend into an easement. The specific request is to allow for an attached patio to project into the required rear setback for a depth of 17 feet at the patio's greatest depth, which is an 85% of the setback, and for the attached patio to extend into the existing 10-foot utility easement on the property. And as mentioned, section 2.6.1.1 F2D is that section that specifically states any attached patio cover sharing the roof line of the main structure that is not fully enclosed may project into a required rear yard, not closer than 50% of the required rear setback for that specific zoning district, provided that it is not encroaching on any easement. And this is actually a section of the code that was added as an amendment in August 2019. Essentially, before that point, people weren't allowed to go with an attached patio into the rear setback. After this point, they were allowed to encroach to an extent into the rear setback. And so to date, staff has received 6 phone calls asking for more information about the request. And so as mentioned, the zoning of the property, as well as the zoning for all the properties adjacent, is that single-family residential 1 zoning, which is your typical zoning for a single-family residential subdivision. And looking kind of at the future land use designation, the property as well as the properties to the north, south, and west are that low-density residential designation, and then the area to the east, which is the golf course, is an open space designation. And so as mentioned, the properties to the north, south, and east west are the single family residential uses. And then that property to the east is that existing golf course. Kind of looking at a history of the property, it was originally annexed into the city in 1970. It was then platted as a part of Green T Section 1 in 1970. And then the subject property was developed in 1981 with a single family residence, which is that existing residence on the property. And here we get a look of the subject property from Country Club Drive. And so looking kind of at the site plan for the property, we see that residence in the white, that'd be the existing single-family residence. There's also a pool on the property, which has received a permit and has been issued. And then the actual subject of the request is that proposed attached patio cover, which is just to the left of the pool. So here's a rendering of that attached patio cover as well as the pool. And this would be if I was looking from the golf course at the property. The next slides are also just kind of elevations of that. This would be the elevation, like that rear elevation. I'm looking at the patio cover, as well as the side elevations of, you kind of get an instance of where the overhang is occurring in comparison to where the columns are. You can see there's 6 foot, 6x6 wrapped wood post, and then it extends over. And so here's actually a view today of the pool, which has received permits and has begun construction, but now is essentially, before moving too far forward, it's now awaiting a determination by the board before likely doing concrete work or for the patio. And so just as mentioned, that section of the UDC is the one that specifically states that a attached patio cover shall not go closer than 50% of the required rear setback for the zoning district, provided that it is not encroaching any easement. And looking at the R1 district has a required rear setback of 20 feet. So 50% of that 20 feet would allow for an attached patio to go 10 feet into the required rear setback. And so here we get a look at the kind of an analysis of what would be allowed with the UDC and then what would be allowed with, or what the applicant's requesting. So first, the brown area that's outlined is the footprint of the attached patio cover, with the kind of brown shaded area being that area which is actually the subject of this request. And then the black dashed line represents, this would be the rear setback for the property for that 20 feet. And then the green line coming across, that would be where your 10 foot or your 50% of the rear setback would be located. So anything below that green line would be by right, you can do this. And then we also get a look at kind of where that 10-foot utility easement sits with kind of the blue shaded area. And so what the applicant is requesting is to go 7 additional feet at its greatest depth. The whole patio doesn't go that 7 feet because it's kind of at an angle to the back of the property line. But at its greatest depth, it would go 7 feet into kind of past that 10 foot and into the utility easement. And then that'd be a total depth into the actual setback for the rear. It'd be a total of 17 feet, which is about an 85%, which you can compare with the 10 foot 50%. And so also the applicant, kind of the reasoning for bringing this request before the board is, one, because it's located on a golf course. They stated the golf course and as well as the easement kind of give minimal space to the property owner to actually be able to develop something in his backyard, as well as stating that the actual overhang that's going into the easement will not actually be on the ground. The area that is over, the overhang is under, or my bad, the ground that's the overhang is going over is actually a removable paver, so it's not a permanent surface in the ground. And as well as they stated that the overhang is actually a low-bearing roof, so they're stating kind of that it wouldn't have an impact on anyone maybe servicing utilities or needing to get into that utility easement. And so staff found that the request met 3 of the 8 criteria for approval of a variance. And so as mentioned, the applicant has stated that the location of the property on a golf course, which is kind of green space, and as they stated, and the size of the easement are unique features to the property. However, staff finds that the unique features that are stated do not create an undue hardship on the property, as an attached patio can still be built on the property, which was shown in the site plan, that anything below that green line can still be developed on the property as an attached patio. And additionally, while the applicant has stated the proposed overhang will not impact the utility easement as it is not a low-bearing roof, structures are typically not permitted within easements as they may impact the ability for either existing utilities to be maintained or for any new utilities to be placed in the easement in the future. So therefore, staff is unable to recommend approval of the requested variance. And that concludes staff's report.
Thank you so much. Do we have an applicant presentation? Yes, sir. If you would state your name and address.
This is Lance Willis, 3019 Country Club Drive in Pearland. And I am the applicant who's trying to do this, and I wanted to tell you a little bit about how this got started. When I bought the house 4.5, 5 years ago, there was already a pool in the backyard that was not only built right in the middle of the setback, but was built in the easement. And not just a little bit in the easement, it came to within a foot of my fence line. That pool was already there. It's been there, I don't know how many years, 20, 25, 30 years. And so when we decided to remove that pool because it had leaks and it was causing water problems, as a matter of fact, here with your own water utility district, I had two $400 and something water bills and a $900 water bill because that pool was leaking. So I decided we looked at remodeling it. Remodeling it ended up being almost as costly as building a new one. So we decided to build a new one. Again, a little bit about myself. I've been a Pearland resident off and on for 30 years. I'm a member of the Pearland Education Foundation on the board of directors. I work for Bayway Automotive Group. I run a Lincoln store in Houston, but obviously we have a store here in Pearland as well. So we're Pearland residents. My daughter graduated here. I've got 4 grandkids in the school system right now. I'm a believer in Pearland. So when I started to do this project, I wanted to do it right. I told my pool company, who's here represented today as well, I wanted to get all the permits. I wanted to do everything by the book. I wanted to get out of that easement area. Now, the frustrating part to me is by trying to do the right thing, I've obviously opened up myself for a mess, because that's what it's turned into. My pool was started in November. Here I am approaching April, and you saw the condition of my backyard. Here's the issue I have. Is there any way I could get you to put that picture up that had the black and brown and green lines right there? You'll notice from my back wall to my house to my fence line is the 20-foot setback. It's the entire, my backyard's the setback. Now, I can build in 50% of that, I'm told, into the setback. That gives me 10 foot. And I've been told I can do an over allowance into the easement by 2 foot. Well, when we designed this, we designed the pillars to all be outside of the easement. Again, I wanted to be per code. I wanted to be out of the permit. I had heard nothing about this setback, which originally was what I was told was why I couldn't do this project, was the setback. It had nothing to do with the easement, because I was literally getting out of the easement. Well, as time went on, that sort of morphed into, well, you're going to be overhanging the easement. And the truth is I am. I'm 16 feet above the ground on an easement that is basically obsolete. I've been told by members of this building that it's not even used anymore. It hadn't been used in years and years and years. It's just 8 foot of my yard that I can't build anything permanent in. And I'm trying to follow those rules. Again, if you take the 20 foot back to 10 foot, that's where I want to put my pillars, where I'm not in the easement at all. I'm outside of the 8 foot easement. And then I want to overhang 16 feet up in the air. I want to overhang 5 feet. So the board gives me 2 feet. I'm asking for 3 additional feet, 16 feet in the air over an easement that's obsolete. When I asked the question about that, they said even if I was trying to put this roof 100 feet up in the air, I would still be in the easement. And I'm not a construction person. I'm not an engineer. I'm probably not even all that smart. But I've seen a lot of people working in my backyard. The water utility district just did a major project here in the last couple of years, and they never got in my backyard because most of the easement work is done on the pool side of my fence, on the golf side of my fence, because there's a lot of open space there. And the biggest machine they had out there was a Bobcat. And I don't know any Bobcats that go 16 feet up in the air that my roof line is going to interfere with. So I'm trying to do this under a common sense basis. I'm not asking, I don't think, for anything really special. I'm trying to improve my home. Again, I pay taxes in a myriad of different ways within the Pearland district, and this will improve my home, and I have all confidence that y'all will raise my taxes because of that, and I will pay even more. But I don't understand why an obsolete easement and a setback that takes my entire yard, I want to emphasize that, 20 feet setback was what it says. That is my yard from that back wall to the fence. So my entire yard, I'm basically told I have to be governed what I can put in it. I'm sorry, I misunderstood. I thought I had unlimited time on this. I apologize. I will talk faster. If there's any technical questions, I've got my pool company here who have a great reputation in the city of Houston. They're one of if not the first or second top-rated pool company in the city of Houston. They do work all over Pearland. I'm just asking to put a 3-foot overhang, 16 foot up in the air, that yes, it encroaches over the easement line by I guess a total of 5 foot, because you're giving me 2, I'm asking for 3 more, so that I don't have a patio that's so small I can't even put an outdoor kitchen or chairs on it. Because I'm sorry, a 10 or 12 foot patio is smaller than what I tore down. I tore down a patio that was already existing. I tore down a pool that was already in the easement to try to follow the rules set forth by Pearland, and this is where I'm at. So I'm asking for your consideration to overrule I got all the respect for the city engineers in the world, but at some point, there's rules and there's common sense, and I'm asking for a little bit of common sense, because I'm asking for a roof to be extended, no pillar in the easement, no concrete anywhere in the easement, nothing permanent anywhere in the easement, or past the 2-foot part of the setback that they've given me, just a roof line that goes 3 foot out, past that spot. That's all I'm asking for. And that roof line is 16 feet above the ground. Even if the utility districts did come in and want to bury something, they're not going to be using a machine 16 feet up. Thank you very much for your time. And thank you also for meeting here tonight. I know y'all, next Thursday's my 32nd anniversary, and I appreciate y'all made special circumstances to get me on a public hearing tonight, and I thank everybody involved for that.
Thank you, sir. Do we have any persons wishing to speak for or against proposal?
And Chair, before we move on, just want to, Mr. Willis, you do have, within some reason up to the chair, no time restraint. So if you'd like your pool contractor to say anything, you're welcome to do so.
Well, again,
make
if
sure
y'all
you
want to hear
conclude.
him, I'll be glad to let Avery Walker come and talk. He works for Avery Pools. He's probably better at answering any technical questions than I am. As I said, I'm not an engineer. I'm not an expert at all in this construction, but I do know he reached out and did the permitting, and we found out literally a month into the process that we hit a snag with this particular permit. So if any of you have questions, Avery's certainly available here, or if you have anything you want to add, come up here.
So what was your statement to the applicant?
Just, there's not a time limit minus what you'll allow. And so I just want to make sure he felt that he can conclude his presentation
Oh,
in a way.
yeah,
he's good with.
Yeah,
that was mine. I want to make him available. If there's anything y'all would like to hear from him, he is available. But that's basically my case. I'm trying to get 3 foot extra to my roof line. I was even told at one point, if I hadn't attached the roof line to the house, that I would be within my rights. And what I'm trying to do is make it hurricane ready. I'm trying to support it. I'm trying to make it a safe environment rather than a standalone patio that would, to me, be more dangerous to my neighbors and myself if it wasn't attached to the house. I'm trying to attach it to the house, secure it, meet all the hurricane standards, meet all the standards for building code. And it seems like the more I try to do right, the more I'm getting my hands slapped. And I would ask your consideration for that.
Yes, sir. You okay with that? Okay. So with no persons wishing to speak for or against proposal? Okay, we'd like to move into staff and applicant discussion. Any questions or comments from the board to the, go ahead.
A couple of questions to address to staff, if I could. What is the or what's the definition of an easement? Is there the legal definition? Is there any language in that talks about the area above ground level? I don't. Do we have anybody ever contemplate this might come up, or is there a definition more succinct about what an easement is?
There is not a succinct definition. What I would say is that when the plat was done that created the easement, it just says a utility easement, the same type of language that you see here. In the city's Unified Development Code, when we see a utility easement, if it doesn't say WSE, we interpret that as a dry utility, WSE being water and sewer easement, so where the wet things go.
Yeah.
So the things that you would normally see in a utility easement like this could be gas, it could be electricity if it's underground, it could be AT&T, Comcast, or Verizon, you know, those cable type things. That's what you would expect to see in it. There are some places in Green Tea where you may see 1 or 3 or none of those things in the utility easement. At the time, I think the developer, when they created the plat with that utility easement, they made that easement, and then for whatever reason, they put the utilities on the front, or some of the utilities on the front. And I can't say for sure or certainty where they are in relation to this property. I don't pretend to have that information, so I can't say what is or is not back there. The pool contractor may have additional information. I thought I heard Avery, right?
Avery's the pool name. It's Walker's his
So
name.
Walker Drager, he's been in it, right? The property owner may have some information. Mr. Lance Willis, I thought, right?
Yes, that's correct.
He may have information because he had the concrete pulled out of there. I don't know if they saw anything in there when they did that.
No,
When he got his survey for the property when he bought it 4 years ago, it surely would have identified where some of those things may be.
well, and that's why I was calling it obsolete. We have, when we bought our house, we bought an existing home that was built in 1982. At first, I thought it was a tear down. We decided the bones of the home, and whoever built the home at that time did such a miraculous job, we decided to remodel instead of tearing it down. One of the things we did was add gas. We didn't have gas into the home. We added gas. It didn't go into that utility district at all. I have Comcast Xfinity cable. It doesn't go into that utility easement at all. Pearland has redone the entire water utility thing out there. No one ever dug anything up in my utility easement. I was told, I talked to so many people, I'll be honest with you, I couldn't even tell you who within the city's organization, that was almost considered an obsolete easement because it's 40-something years old and just hasn't been used in many, many years. So I have every one of these utilities that we're speaking of. I even contacted them, and to get them to even give me a letter to say, we don't care, we figured it was going to cost me a minimum of $3,000 per utility, and in some cases as much as $5,000, because you can look up the form on CenterPoint Energy. They want $400 to $600 minimum, up to $400 more an hour. And then if they have anything special to have to send anybody else out there, the minimum is $3,000. By the time I do that by 5 or 6 utilities, I've spent $15,000 or $20,000 again to put a roof 16 feet up over an obsolete utility. And I don't even think the engineers really think it's a problem. It's just what the letters on the board say, what the rule, when somebody wrote it, they didn't take this into consideration. As this gentleman said, they didn't spell out how high does an easement go. Does it go up like a high-rise building to 100, 200 feet, or does it stop at a normal distance above the ground? Because obviously, no matter what you're putting in there, you don't need 16, 20, 25, or 30 feet above the ground to put it in there. And I'm in no way blocking any other part of the easement, no permanent structure in the easement. I'm just looking to extend my roof 16 feet up and attach it to the house. Because again, I was told if I had a 1-inch gap between my house and this patio, then it wouldn't be a problem, which blew my mind. But I guess I'm just having a hard time understanding. I'll be honest. I'm just a Pearland taxpayer. I'm nobody special. I work here. My kids go to school here. My grandkids go to school here. And I'm just trying to improve my house and improve the tax base for the city of Pearland.
Mr. Schrum, did you get the answer to the question you were looking for, sir?
Say, does your question get answered?
Well, I did. I've got a couple more to city staff though, when we can. Anybody else?
I do have a hypothetical question, and you may or may not be able to address it, and that's fine. But if a utility company did come in to use this easement and for some reason determined that the patio was in the way, needed to bring in large, machinery, what have you, what would be the homeowner's responsibility? Would they be responsible for removing that, or if it was damaged, it would be their responsibility? And again,
Yes, sir. It is a little bit speculative and difficult for me to answer, but what I can tell you from my understanding of state law for this issue, looking at other types of cases where something like this has happened, is that if the property owner, the city, doesn't have the authority to let somebody build in somebody else's easement or do something that substantially interferes with their easement. So while this may be 16 feet up, if there's not in this case, at least I'm not aware of it, if there were a transformer in the backyard and to lift that transformer up, you needed some sort of crane or apparatus, and the overhang interfered with that, then that would be on the homeowner. The utility could say, you are substantially interfering with my right to maintain my equipment and the easement. Removing that portion of the ceilings, that portion of the roof is on you. And you have X number of days to get that out of my easement. And if I have to remove it because you won't, then you will compensate me. So that would be the general overview of how the liability, so to speak, attaches from state law, or at least my understanding. I don't have anything that says that there's a transformer here.
sure.
Is there something else that would require that? Again, I don't know. I think the city has a sanitary sewer just on the other side of it, but that is not in this easement. That's not in the dry utility easement.
Just
Can I add one thing to that?
uh,
I'm sorry.
the case you laid out in general terms, if we granted the variance, would that same statement apply? Would the
Yes,
conditions?
yes, sir, it would. Just because the city granted the variance does not take away the utility's right to enjoy its easement. So even if we granted the variance, if there's substantial interference, there's substantial interference. That's the end of the story for the utility company. It's an issue of staff's authority to approve something without you making the determinations pursuant to the variance request. Nobody on staff has that authority unless you grant the variance request.
We don't add any exposure to the cost to the city if that hypothetical were to occur. If we said, yeah, the variance is okay, our okaying it doesn't add to the city's cost exposure. If something would, whatever hypothetically would occur, that would require the removal of all or part of that variance overhang. We don't do anything to add to the city's exposure because we agreed to it.
That one is a little bit more difficult. I would not be surprised if at some point in time there were hypothetically, and again, I'm not saying this is going to happen, and the likelihood of happening seem remote to me, but 7 years from now, I might say something different, right? If the city granted this, the utility is going to say, you move it. Whoever owns the home at that time might say, no, the city approved it, therefore the city's liable, or the utility who just wants to put whatever in the thing could add the city to any lawsuit to recoup its cost to comply or to put the information in there, to put the equipment or whatever it is that they need to put in there, in the event that they couldn't do it within the parameters being 16 feet above, or whatever it might be. Theoretically, the only way the city could be liable is if it is either a true policy the city created, and I don't think that going to the ZBA for a variance attaches that policy decision. Or if it were a tangible use of physical property. Well, the city's not using any of its property for this decision. And the courts have said information is not, so
Sure.
just because you did a permit, I don't think that that's tangible use of physical property.
I have a couple of just clarifying questions, if I could, back to staff. The original pool was removed, I understand, and there's a new pool that's been set. Martin is,
So, correct. One of the pictures that was supplied in the staff presentation
so we don't,
provided a view of their new construction.
and we didn't have anything to say about a variance, or that wasn't required. ZBA didn't need to pre-approve or grant a variance. The city just said you've got 50% leeway, right? They just, so I'm saying that's okay. There's nothing else we need to do or for in this future as far as granting a variance with anything related to that concrete pool, correct?
My understanding with the pool is that it is in a compliant position.
All right. Can you go back to that one more slide that showed the 7-foot setback, I think, or variance? It's the color picture. Yeah, right there. So 50% of a 20-foot setback, am I correct? It's a 20-foot setback. Okay, so that gives 10 feet. And the request for the variance is an additional 7 feet for a total, 7 feet. So we would be voting on the maximum a variance of 7 feet of this overhang. Is that correct? We're not.
Mr. Willis was saying it was 5 feet. That's why I want to make sure we got clarification on that.
I can tell you what I was told is, according to the rules, I can do, without having to ask for the variance, 2 feet. That's okay for the setback from what I understand. And I guess it depends on where you measure it. We measured it to be an additional 3 feet for a total of 5 feet. Now I'm looking at this survey and it looks like it runs longer as it gets further to the left. I don't know if there's anything I can do about that or not, but I'm basically, the green line is where I'm stopping putting anything permanent. I'm staying on.
Correct. I'm just trying to get an understanding. So we measured this from the longest point, but I'm just trying to, because the applicant keeps saying additional 3 feet to make a total of 5 feet. Is he's basically measured from the lowest point and we're measuring from the longest point? Is that what's happening? Because we can see as a diagonal. I'm just trying to get an understanding.
Correct. There have been a few things that I would personally like to clarify in relation to what was in the staff packet versus what has been discussed for you today. So if you don't mind, I'm going to hijack the screen here. This is again, just straight from the staff packet that was sent out to everyone. What is shown in that packet is this side elevation, looking at both sides of the structure. And the structure shows that it has a bottom eave of 11 foot, 2 1/4 inches. So I'm not certain where this 16-foot quote is being pulled from, or if it's just inaccurate information. But the top of the roof is an additional 11 foot, 8 inches and 1/4 up, which rough math takes you to about 23 feet. So neither 11 foot or 23 foot are 16 foot. So that's issue number one. Issue number two is that we're showing a 6 foot maximum overhang, again, from this elevation. And it is concurrent to show on both sides from the plans that are submitted. Now, fully understand what is shown on the slide and also what was included within the packet clearly indicates that there is bit of an angle, and that this really and truly creates more of a trapezoid where one side is slightly shorter than the opposite side.
So does that mean we're talking about 16 feet or 6 feet? Now I am confused.
I believe the discussion has been 16 foot from the applicant's side, but from the staff report and what was submitted, we look at the bottom of the eave because any equipment would need to work within that space.
In what space? 6 feet or 16 feet?
The 11 foot. So any equipment that it needs to come into this easement. So again, this is showing the, as if you're standing over here looking towards the structure, you would see this post, and then you would have a clearance of 11 foot, 2 1/4 inches, according to this drawing. And this drawing was submitted.
And we originally talked about 16 feet clearance.
I'm not certain where the 16 foot is.
Gotcha. I see what you're saying. I see what you're saying now. Okay.
Does the applicant have?
So can we clarify that? Because I mean, Mr. Williams was saying 16 feet. Now we're looking at, I mean, the drawings say 11 feet.
Yeah, I'll let Mr. Avery do that. I will note, it looks like there are 2 spots, and I'm sure the gentleman is correct with his measurements, but it looks like there's 2 spots at one particular spot that, yeah, there looks, even if they are 11 feet, but then 1 yard over, they're 12 and a half, 13 feet. And as he said, in the middle is 23 feet. So maybe the original number I was given was an average. I don't know, but I'll let Mr. Walker Drager talk to you about that.
Would you state your name and address for us, sir?
Walker Drager, 5296 Otsego Court.
Thank you.
So board, first off, thank y'all for having me up here. What I wanted to address is, yes, the gentleman was corrected. That is the lowest eve point, and that is essentially the point for concern. I will be honest, being one of the primary pool builders in the Houston area, I have, in all transparency, I have hit so many lines whenever we're digging pools, it's not even funny. It's just part of the business that we work in. I've seen lines rerouted, I've seen them moved, I've seen everything from moving a transformer box to moving a pedestal to moving everything. I've never seen a machine that has came out there over the height of 11 feet. I will be honest, on a day-to-day basis, I probably put in 200 pools in the city each year. I have so many clients ask me to come to these meetings or talk about these variances that are necessary. And most of the time, in all honesty, this is the first one I've been to. It's for the sole fact that I believe what we're trying to do here is buildable, it's safe. I have had 811 come out on multiple occasions to mark all of the yard. We have determined that nothing falls in that. I did want to address the board and maybe the staff here too on a certain question. So I don't know if Mr. Willis was right with this statement. He's been pretty persistent on talking to you guys, so I'm sure he has heard this. In the event that this is an unattached structure, say I have that structure off by 1 foot of the existing house, is that within guidelines, or is that just period? Did he misspeak on that fact?
So that is incorrect.
Okay.
I mean, the ace of spades of the conversation is that there's a 10-foot easement in the back of this property. And so
Gotcha.
while detached products do have different requirements, if there was not an easement there is very much an easement present.
Yeah.
And also, I would also like to address, there's no concerns about the quality that Avery or Mr. Willis are wanting to construct. It's nothing about the materials. It's nothing about that this is going to be a bad product, anything like that. It truly is the existing conditions. There's a platted easement on the back of the property.
So we just want to make sure, because we definitely were hearing numbers, and so now we want to make sure, these plans that we're looking at, these are the plans that we're talking about that will be built if given the approval.
Yes, sir. Those are.
Okay, that's what we were trying to make sure we
Yep.
understand,
So
because
everything you see here will be built exactly to code, because that is directly what I got from my engineer that falls in architectural seal with stamp TDI windstorm inspections and falls under the TDI government official.
okay, so we're looking at 6 feet instead of, but if you look at it diagonally, then it would change because it's drifting along the side. So that's what we're looking at, with the total props to be of 7 feet, but the minimum total of about 5 feet. Is that correct, staff?
Yes. And
Okay.
a clarifying point is that originally the plans didn't show how far the patio went from the 10 feet, kind of that where the easement started or where the 10 feet started. So I actually reached out to the pool company to kind of provide that measurement. And that's where originally the measurement they provided was 6.5 feet into the easement. So that's where usually we go to a rounded up number just in case, let's say they're building and they go to 6.6 or 6.6 instead of the 6.5. It
Gotcha. So,
gives them a little bit of leadway so that, let's say, what's built on site doesn't match exactly, but from their plans, they showed it as being 6.5 feet into there.
so we're just to give a final clarification, there will be no actual poles being in the ground in the easement. We are correct about that.
Yes, it'll
Looking at the
be,
design, that there will be no poles put in the easement.
columns will be outside. It'll be removable pavers on like a sand base, essentially.
Okay.
So you could pick them up and move them essentially.
Any other questions by the board or comments?
Yeah, I still have a couple from a global overview perspective on this. This property was annexed in 1970, is that right?
Yes.
How is this possible that the city has the legal right to come in and annex property and say, we've decided we're not going to let you have a backyard? We're going to put our easement line at your back door. How's that possible? Is this did they do this in all the houses?
Well, yeah,
in
and
that
so
neighborhood?
the easement's not ours. The easement would have been put in when the subdivision was developed.
That and and Lawrence, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong on this, but the city has what's called a franchise agreement with certain utility providers. And through that franchise agreement, during the platting process, the city goes out and acquires these utility easements as kind of a standard for these utility companies to be able to eventually provide their utilities to those residents. So as part of our duties within that franchise agreement to allow future users to eventually provide their unique service to the residents, we, through the platting process, obtain these utility easements.
Right, but then from those utility easements, the city says, well, not only that, we're going to slap you with a setback you've got to have, knowing that setback's going to be in my back door. I mean, that just seemed awfully punitive to me.
I'd like to discuss that for just a moment. Property owners and developers have an opportunity to put structures anywhere where they want on the property. You can choose to have a small front yard and a large backyard. You can choose to have a small backyard and a large front yard. You can choose to have as much of as little as you'd like while still building within the allowable setbacks.
This house
So
was
those are
annexed as
absolute
pre-existing with
minimums.
those requirements. And I'm not arguing. I understand what you're saying, but this house pre-existed all of these rules, regulations, setbacks, utility easements, blah, blah, blah. I mean, the city just came in and said, here's a house, here's the property, and we're just, you're going to live within our rules. Final and last question, I guess, is y'all had an overhead picture of the neighborhood there. Is this the only property where this setback or requirement goes up to somebody's back door? They look pretty even there, man. That's just, looking at a picture, whatever that's worth. Or is this the only property that's got this same issue, or do you all know?
So, I think it's important to rephrase. The easement was put in with the subdivision. The easement has nothing to do with the city of Pearland.
Sir, can I say something there?
Of course.
Here's really where my problem started. When I first heard the denial, it was from Patrick here, and the easement was not mentioned at all. The reason for the denial was the setback. And it was only after I started making these very good points that my entire yard was in the setback that all of a sudden this new rule about the easement, because that's when I was told if I didn't attach it to the house, then I wouldn't be part of the deal. I just heard the gentleman say, yeah, because there's an easement, then it doesn't matter if I attach it to the house or not, it's not approved. But my original, what I was told, was not an easement problem. That was told to me later. I forget his name, I apologize. But originally what I was told was that it was the setback that was the problem. The easement was not the problem. Remember, we were looking at a pool in the easement. It was already there. It had been there when I bought the house. It was, this structure, as you said, was built in 1982. I didn't change any of the backyard structure. I remodeled the house, but I remodeled the inside of the house. So that's where my frustration lies. Basically, I'm told that my entire backyard is in this setback from that point where I'm trying to put the pavilion at. And, you know, I'm okay with, like I said, I'm not an engineer. I didn't get out and measure any of this stuff myself. Most of what I'm telling you is what I'm repeating what I was told. 16 foot, like I said, maybe it was an average. I don't care if I get the 2 foot plus the 3 foot, and maybe that stretches out to 5.5 foot because it's not even. I'm okay with having a 10 foot plus 5 foot pavilion. That's big enough to do something. I'm not quibbling over whether it's 6 foot or 7 foot, because in my mind, I've been fighting for 5 foot the whole time. So, and my frustration is, it seems like every time I make a point, like with the setback, then the easement started coming into play, and then I found out after that the easement is obsolete and not being used and hadn't been used in 20 years. And these, you know, so it's like no matter what I come, there's a determination that I'm not going to win. I can't put my deal up there. And that's why I came to you gentlemen, because I feel like the goal line keeps moving. And I'm counting on y'all to see just the common sense of what I'm asking for. I don't think I'm asking for anything ridiculous. None of my neighbors are concerned. The people I've talked to in the neighborhood, frankly, all the advice they gave me was, you screwed up. You shouldn't have asked permission. You should have just done it. I said, that's not who I am. But I can tell you, to answer the question one of you gentlemen just asked, are there other neighbors that are in this easement and in this setback? Absolutely. I've gone and looked myself. There's people with goldfish ponds on top of the easement. There's people with all kinds of buildings all up and down Gulf Crest. Again, this is a 45, 50-year-old subdivision. They've built all kinds of things in the easement and all kinds of things in the setback. The difference, my mistake, be honest, on hindsight, is trying to do it right and legally and ask for permission. That was my mistake.
Well, I think the evidence is clear that there's no utilities there of any substantial sort, at least if your previous pool, concrete pool, existed there. It'd be kind of tough to run a utility through that concrete, I guess. Would the city disagree with that there's evidence of a utility there?
I don't think the city's taken a position on that, Mr. Schrum. I think the city said that unless we have a letter of no objection, the city does not know.
Well, I know we've had.
So if the utilities will provide a letter of no objection, or the most common utilities, the cities could say, we've heard from these people that there is nothing there.
We've done that I know of a couple of cases we've heard here where the utility people came in and here's a letter from utility. We don't care what you do there. And
Yes, sir.
just rubber stamped it. Yeah, sounds good to me. So,
Yes, sir. That is something that the board has seen in the past and taken into consideration.
Any other questions or comments from the board?
Martin's getting ready to say something.
I would love the opportunity to
yes, Martin.
provide some clarification.
Please.
And again, I'm going to hijack the screen for just a moment. Apologize that it may be difficult to read, but I just want to point out that there are multiple statements within the Unified Development Code that say shall not encroach on any dedicated easement. So if the structure, I'm going to run two different scenarios here. So if the structure were having that 1 foot of separation or to be completely separated from the primary building, then it would fall under the set of rules and regulations on the right. So section 2.5.3.1, and both of these have statements in them that say shall not encroach on any dedicated easement. Following through with the second portion, this is the area where we went in and created in 2019 this allowance for attached patios because we as in staff and the board saw a number of patios come forward asking for relief to go into that rear setback. And some of you may recall and remember that it was kind of a common occurrence with the ZBA to ask for that 50%. So instead of having constant applications come forward, we went in and rewrote or added to the code to allow for that 50% reduction of the rear setback of the zoning district, because zoning districts can be different. This happens to be R1 with a 20-foot required rear setback, and it just so happens that that 20-foot and a half is 10-foot. However, at the end of the statement, it still says not encroaching in any easement.
Mm-hmm.
So while I understand, staff always has an ability to hone our skills and hone our delivery of information to applicants, it does not change what is written in the code, and what is written in the code clearly states not to encroach in the easement.
Irrespective of height doesn't have anything to do with it. You don't encroach.
Correct.
Although we have granted in a couple of cases.
When we have those letters of
We
no
have those
objection,
letters.
and we have,
You're right. You're right.
As I said, those letters were
Any
going to
oth-
cost me several thousand dollars.
Hold on 1 second. Do you have any other questions or comments from the board? Because we were addressing Martin and Gary at the time. Any other comments or questions from the board? Okay, we would like to move into consideration and possible action. Could you place the motion on the screen, please? Read the motion.
Make a motion to approve variance 24-03 as presented.
It's been motioned. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
It's been motioned and second. Any discussion?
Yes. I think we ought to give my personal opinion is we ought to give the applicant the opportunity to get those letters from the utilities as we've done previously on a couple of occasions. At least give him a chance. If he comes up with the letters, then we consider it again. But I know we've approved these kinds of variance requests with those letters from the utilities. So,
I think your point is well taken. However, I think that it's been established that the utilities are not in the easement from the pool gentleman and the owner applicant, and as well as being the concrete pool that's been there. I would say that that's adequate information to say that there's no utilities there.
I want to agree with you 100%. So if I'm getting a sense here, my personal opinion is based on the fact that we have had a concrete pool there as evidence of no utilities. My personal opinion is I'm in favor of granting the variance there. That's my thinking, because we know there's no utilities there. That's my thinking at this point anyway. Somebody else?
Any other discussion?
I have a comment.
Sir.
When you buy a piece of property, just heads up. I'm in the plumbing business. I'm in utilities all the time. And the simple fact is, you're going to dig that. Somebody's eventually going to dig in that utility one way or another. And nowadays, as far as communication, everything's bored, directional boring, and they don't even get in your backyard. They get in somebody's down the street, and they go right underneath your property, and you don't even realize it. So my word of wisdom is make sure you look at that plat before you purchase the house and understand if you got an easement, you can't build in it. Now, I'm in favor of this. Obviously, I second it, but I feel for you because it's your property. You should be able to do what you want with it. But we have rules in place for a reason. And just my heads up on it. Look at whenever you buy a piece of property, look at where the easements are. That's going to cause you problems.
Yes, sir, I agree with you.
So we have a motion on the floor. We have a motion on the floor. All in favor, raise your hand. All opposed, raise your hand. Motion carries 4-1. This concludes the ZBA meeting of March 28th, 2024 at 6:55 PM.
I was in agreement because it was